Hello and welcome to another episode of Random Rewatch. This is your host, Mike, and today we are going to talk about a film that is for a lot of people the definitive film about childhood. It's a movie about a bridge, a body, and four boys who went looking for it. We are diving deep into the 1986 classic, Stand By Me.
Oh man, wait to hear this. What is it?
You guys want to go see a dead body? This is really a good time. You've run into something on your neck. Legion! Oh my God! I want to see a dead kid. Maybe it shouldn't be a party. I'm never gonna get out of this town, am I, Gory?
You! Come back here!
You think Mighty Mouse could beat up Superman? What are you, cracked? I'll kill you, I swear to God.
So, this is, of course, a film by the late, great Rob Reiner, who was tragically killed recently. It's based on a novella by Stephen King, and this is something that Stephen King once said was the first successful translation of his work to film that he thought actually caught his heart. It's not a horror movie, although there are leeches and a dead guy. It is a soul-searching journey. So let's grab a cherry Coke and find a spot by the tracks, and let's get into it. So as I said, this was based on a Stephen King novella called The Body, which was in a book called Different Seasons in 1982. Coincidentally, this is the same book that had another novella in it called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, which, of course, gave us the great Frank Darabont movie, The Shawshank Redemption. So, producer Bruce Evans and Ray Gideon had read the novella, and decided that they wanted to go after the movie rights for it. So, they approached King through his agency. King wanted $100,000 and 10% of the gross of the film, which was a huge deal back in the 1980s. 10%, that's still a huge deal. So Evans and Gideon try to shop this thing around, and one of the problems with it is the story was based on kids, so they knew that the stars of the movie were going to be four kids, four young men, and that meant no big stars were going to be in lead roles in this film. A lot of the studios passed on it. In fact, all the studios passed on it until they got to Embassy Pictures. Embassy negotiated King down to a $50,000 upfront payment and a smaller share of the profits than 10%. Embassy brought in Andrew Scheinman as the lead producer on it because he had more experience. Evans and Gideon wrote the screenplay. Originally, Embassy wanted Adrian Lyne to direct it. He had done Foxers. He had just done Flashdance, but he was considered to be too expensive. So in 1984, Rob Reiner joined the picture. Now, Reiner at the time was mainly known to people still as Mike Stivic, or Meathead from the 1970s TV series All in the Family, although he had started to make a name for himself as a director. In 1984, he had directed This Is Spinal Tap, which was a hugely successful film. He had done, in 1985, he had done a film called The Sure Thing with John Cusack. This would be his third film in 1986, and then he would go on to do, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, A Few Good Men, North, The American President, Ghost of Mississippi. I mean, this guy was just hit after hit after hit. One of the first things he did was change the title. Originally, it was going to be titled The Body, like the novella. He didn't like the name of that. He thought it made it sound too horror-y or whatever, and so he changed it to Stand By Me. And then the other thing that he did, and I think this is really the genius of him as a filmmaker, and what really makes this film stand out, is that the original story and the screenplay were about these four guys, these four boys taking a journey. And it's still about that, but Reiner decided that he was going to focus the film on one of them. And so this film is really about Gordy. It's Gordy's story. It's Gordy's film. As we'll see, Gordy is the narrator, but it really turns out to be like his coming of age story. And the other three boys are characters in that. I think it makes the movie a lot more compelling and a lot more, I don't know, just have a lot more heart and a lot more interest to it. The fact that you're just looking at this one boy in particular. So right before shooting was supposed to be happening, Embassy got sold to Columbia Pictures. Columbia wanted to cancel the film. And Norman Lear, who was, obviously a friend of Rob Reiner, one of the investors in the film, had offered to put in his own money. So he put in $7.5 million of his own money so that this film could get made. And Columbia decided that they were going to go forward and produce the film. They did not have a distribution partner yet. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Reiner looked at 300 young actors to play these characters. And when he finally cast the four of them, and we'll get into each one of them in a little bit when we start diving into the movie. But when the four of them had been cast, he put them up for 2 weeks in a hotel and let them hang out, let them get into trouble, let them bond so that the four of them felt like a cohesive unit, like they were friends, because they developed that type of friendship. And so you have four very specific personality types. You have Chris, who is the natural leader, kind of the mature one in the group, and he brings a real kind of emotional weight to the story and a seriousness to the story, and that's played by River Phoenix. Teddy, who is the troublemaker and probably the least serious of the bunch, he is played by Corey Feldman. Vernon, who is he's just a shy, sweet kid, maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed. He's one that the other kids kind of push around a little bit, and that is played by Jerry O'Connell. And then you have Gordy, who is the smart, sensitive one, and he is played by Will Wheaton. The movie was largely filmed in and around Brownsville, Oregon. The cinematographer was Thomas Del Ruth. He's pretty well known for The Breakfast Club, but he gave this film, I don't know, it's kind of got like a soft focus to it. To me, that kind of gives it kind of this dreamlight state, which makes sense because we're reliving Gordy's memories of 25 years earlier from when he's telling the story. The score is done by Josh Nietzsche, and it's a great score. It really feels like a period piece. The story takes place in 1959, and there's pieces of the great Benny King song Stand By Me woven throughout the film. You hear a little bit of it here, a little bit of it there, but we don't hear the final thing until the end of the film. So that's really it on pre-production. I want to really dive right into this. So let's get into Stand By Me. So we are in 1985, and we see someone who originally is identified as the writer that we find out is the older version of Gordy, and this is played by Richard Dreyfuss. Originally, this was going to be a voiceover only. Rob Reiner interviewed and listened to and recorded a couple of people. Michael McKean, Ted Bissell from That Girl. He was really thinking about David Dukes from Winds of War, but he just didn't think the voice was right, and he wanted something that sounded like Richard Dreyfuss. And when he approached Richard Dreyfuss, according to the oral history, when he approached Richard Dreyfuss was like, well, why don't we just shoot it, and you could use the voiceover, and I'll be the guy in the end. And so that's what they wound up doing, was using him not only as a voice actor, but as an actual actor who played the adult Gordy. And he's just read the obituary of his friend Chris Chambers, and he gives kind of an opening narration to get us set up.
I was 12 going on 13 the first time I saw a dead human being. It happened in the summer of 1959, a long time ago. But only if you measure it in terms of years.
So now we go back to the summer of 1959, and the entire movie, based on the framing of the Richard Dreyfuss character, the entire movie is basically a flashback. So we are the summer of 1959 in Castle Rock, Oregon, the fictional town of Castle Rock, Oregon, and we meet Will Wheaton playing Gordy LaChance. Will Wheaton was 14 at the time. He had done a couple of movies, most notably The Last Starfighter the year before this. He would obviously go on to great fame in Star Trek The Next Generation starting in 1987. And he comes into a treehouse and we find Teddy and Chris, who are sitting in the treehouse smoking and playing cards.
Come on, man, deal.
Teddy Duchamp was the craziest guy we hung around with. He didn't have much of a chance in life. His dad was given to fits of rage. One time he held Teddy's ear to a stove and almost burned it off. Chris Chambers was the leader of our gang and my best friend. He came from a bad family and everyone just knew he'd turn out bad, including Chris.
Teddy here, played by Corey Feldman, back in the 80s, one of the Coreys, the other being Corey Haim. Corey Feldman, at this point, is already been in movies like The Goonies and Gremlins. So he's like one of these rising teen stars of the 80s. And River Phoenix is really the standout of this film. He is 15 at the time they're filming him. He's a really interesting guy. Like, he comes from a very bohemian, nomadic family. He is the oldest child in a family that includes his sister Rain, his brother Joaquin, and younger sisters Liberty and Summer. He began acting in TV commercials around the age of 10. He was in the movie Explorers in 1985. This is only his second film, and it's amazing to think about that. He has such a presence on screen that it's hard to believe that one, he's 15 years old, and two, he's only been in one other movie besides this one. And he would go on later this same year. He would be in Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford, and then he would go on to do A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, Little Nikita. He'd play young Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And unfortunately, he would die tragically at the age of 23 in October of 1993. Just an amazing loss. Just imagine what this kid could have been capable of. So anyway, the three of them are just hanging out and they're doing, typical teenage boy stuff when the fourth member of the gang comes in. This is Jerry O'Connell, who a lot of people will come to know from the TV show Sliders, and then just a ton of work. This is his first film. Looking at him in this film, this kind of short, pudgy, high-pitched voice, obviously the kid of the group, and he turns into, this tall, leading man type. He plays Vern Tessio, and Vern comes in, and Vern has got a story for the guys.
You guys want to go see a dead body? Well, I was under the porch digging,
We all understood what Vern meant right away. At the beginning of the school year, he had buried a quart jar of pennies underneath his house. He drew a treasure map so he could find them again. A week later, his mom cleaned out his room and threw away the map. Vern had been trying to find those pennies for 9 months. 9 months, man. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
And it turns out that he overheard his brother talking about this dead body, about this kid who had gotten hit by a train, and they were going to go to try to find the body, and maybe they could get famous or they could get some kind of reward or something like that. And Vern was underneath the porch and he overheard it, and so he brings it to his friends. So Vern's brother here is Billy, and he is played by Casey Simasco, who we saw in Young Guns. And his friend, Charlie, is played by Gary Riley. Interesting fact about Riley, this same year, he auditioned for the role of Bill S. Preston, Esquire, and Theodore Logan in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So our gang here in the treehouse decide that they are going to go find the body, and they are going to report it and steal the thunder from the older boys. And then they come up with a plan. Well, actually, I should say Gordy comes up with a plan on how it's going to work and how their parents are going to not notice that they're gone.
Oh, we tell our folks. Exactly what you said. We'll all tell our folks we're tenting out in your backfield. You tell your folks you're sleeping over at Teddy's. Then we say we're going over to the drag races the next day. We're rock solid till dinner tomorrow night.
Man, that's a plan and a half.
But if we do find that kid's body over in South Harlow, they'll know we didn't go to the drag races. We'll get hided.
Nobody will care. Because everybody's going to be so jazzed about what we found, it's not going to make a difference. Yeah. Well, my dad'll hide me anyway, but hell, it's worth the hiding. Let's do it.
And I'm going to tell you, as a semi-feral kid growing up in the 1970s, yeah, this plan makes perfect sense. So we find out along the way that Gordy's older brother has been killed, and I'm assuming some kind of accident or something like that, and that he and his father do not have a good relationship. We find out that Chris and his father do not have a good relationship. But anyway, so they set off, the four guys set off, and they are going to go find the body. And Chris reveals that he stole a gun from his father in case they have they need some protection. And so they go off on the way. We also cut back to, quote, the gang, which is friends of Vern's older brother, and we meet Eyeball, played by Bradley Gregg, and Ace, who's played by a very young Kiefer Sutherland. We last met Kiefer Sutherland in Young Guns, and this is a couple of years before that. This is his fourth film. This is really his breakout role. This and The Lost Boys, which he would do the next year in 1987. These are really the two films that kind of put Kiefer Sutherland on the map. Meanwhile, our heroes, they start walking down the railroad tracks and they have a conversation about how long they think it's going to be.
If we follow the tracks all the way into Harlow, it should be about 20 miles. Sound about right to you, Gordy?
Yeah, it might even be 30. Gee, maybe we should just hitchhike.
There's no way that sucks.
Why not? We could go out to Route 7 to the Shiloh Church, then down the back Harlow Road. We'll be there by sundown.
That's pussy.
Hey, it's a long ways.
Did your mother ever have any kids that lived?
They have a little planning session where they realize that, they're going to need to eat. So they kind of collect how much money they have, which is really not a lot, but also it's 1959, so they don't really need a lot. So they decide they're going to pool their money, and Gordy's going to go to the store, and he's going to buy us up some food. And then we basically go through these kind of series of vignettes on their journey. The first one being that a train is coming down the tracks, and so they got to get off the tracks, but Teddy refuses to get off the tracks, is standing in front of the train, almost challenging, until Chris saves him. Meanwhile, we cut back to the gang, Ace and the boys, and they're driving down a road in a car, which I'm pretty sure is stolen, and they're knocking down mailboxes. They're playing this game where they hit mailboxes as they drive by them with a baseball bat. The next vignette with the boys they're at this junkyard and they're going to try to get some water, but we find out that this is a junkyard that is owned by someone named Milo, who has a dog named Chopper.
No trespassing was enforced by Milo Pressman, the junkman, and his dog Chopper, the most feared and least seen dog in Castle Rock. Legend had it that Milo had trained Chopper not just to sick, but to sick specific parts of the human anatomy. Thus, a kid who had illegally scaled the junkyard fence might hear the dread cry, "Chopper, sick balls." But right now, neither the dread Chopper nor Milo was anywhere in sight.
And so there is a confrontation between Milo and the boys, and we find out as Milo teases Teddy, we find out that Teddy's father is apparently in a mental institution, and Milo knows him, and so he gives Teddy a hard time about it.
What did you call me?
I know who you are. You're Teddy Duchamp. Your dad's a loony. A loony up in the nut house in Togus. He took your ear, and he put it to a stove, and he burnt it off.
My father stormed the beach at Normandy.
He's crazier than a rat. No wonder you're acting the way you are, with a loony for a father.
You call my dad a loony again, I'll kill you.
But in the meantime, we see them. They're just doing stuff that, young boys are doing. They're having spitting contests, and they're doing coin flips, and they're telling mother jokes, and they're just being normal kids on this adventure. But we come to a part where Chris and Gordy, and you get the idea that, like, these are really the two of these close friends. These are the two closest friends. And so Chris and Gordy start to have this conversation about, like, their future and what's going to happen. And Chris is really pessimistic about what the future holds for, guys like him, where he's looking at Gordy, and Gordy he's the smart one, right? He is the one that Chris kind of in a way looks up to. And so he tells Gordy that, as they move into higher grades, as they move into junior high, that things are going to be different.
You ready for school?
No.
Junior high. You know what that means. The next junior won't be split up.
What are you talking about? Why would that happen?
It's not going to be like grammar school, that's why. You're taking your college courses, and me, Teddy, and Vern, well, we'll be in the shop courses with the rest, making ashtrays and birdhouses.
So the guys continue walking along, and they come to this really long railroad bridge, and they're walking across the railroad bridge, and they're having a debate, and Gordy hears something. He thinks he hears something, and he puts his hand down on the rail, and he feels a vibration, and he knows a train's coming, and now they're in the middle of this long bridge, so they got to run, and Vern falls, and so they're running, and Teddy and Chris, who are up ahead, they get off the bridge, and Vern and Gordy are, they're far behind, and they're running, and the train's coming, and they finally jump off the side of the bridge just in time to avoid getting hit by the train. So then we see them at night. They've pitched a little campsite, and they're sitting around just having these conversations. I love this part where they're just having these weird conversations about completely random things, which is, if you've ever hung around preteen boys, this is pretty much what the conversations sound like.
Mickey's a mouse, Donald's a duck, Pluto's a dog. What's Goofy? If I can only have one food for the rest of my life, that's easy. Pez. Cherry flavored Pez. No question about it.
Goofy's a dog. He's definitely a dog.
I knew the $64,000 question was fixed. There's no way anybody could know that much about opera.
He can't be a dog. He wears a hat and drives a car.
Wagon Train's a really cool show, but did you ever notice that they never get anywhere? Just keep wagon training.
There's this long pie eating story that Gordy tells, which Vern likes and Teddy doesn't, or Teddy likes the story, doesn't like the ending. They hear some wolves off in the distance. They decide that they're going to take turns standing guard. So you see that going on. They decide at one point that they're walking down the tracks, and they decide they're going to take a shortcut across this big field and through the woods. And there's some conversation about that. Vern doesn't want to do that, but the rest of the guys take off, and they start running through the woods, and they come to like this swamp or this river. Chris feels the bottom of it with a stick, and he says, "Oh, it's not too deep." And they start to walk in, and it's way deeper than they thought, so they wind up in the water. And then they're playing around in the water. They're having a good time. It's not daunting to them. It doesn't ruin their trip. They're just in the water. They're horse playing around. And then all of a sudden they see something, I think it was on Vern's neck, and then they realize they're covered in leeches. And so they go screaming. They get out of the water, and they're all covered in leeches. They're pulling the leeches off. And Gordy has a leech in a rather private place, but they all manage to survive. Anyway, Ace gets Billy and Charlie to spill the beans, so to speak, on what they saw. And so these guys decide that maybe they're going to go and claim any reward money or any fame that comes along with finding the body. Meanwhile, as I said, Billy and Charlie have told the gang what's going on, and so they're off on their own quest looking for the body. And we cut to the boys walking down the railroad tracks, and Vern spots the body in the woods, and they all pause for a minute and kind of realize the weight of what they're doing.
The train had knocked Ray Brower out of his keds, just like it had knocked the life out of his body.
Jesus.
The kid wasn't sick. The kid wasn't sleeping. The kid was dead.
And so finding Ray Brower makes Gordy think about like his own brother. His brother's played in flashbacks here by John Cusack. Cusack had been in Rob Reiner's last movie prior to Stand By Me, A Sure Thing. And so I guess, for this small role, Reiner brought him in for that. The father's played by Marshall Bell. Marshall Bell was kind of, through like the 80s and the 90s, was kind of in a lot of genre movies. He was in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. He would go on to be in Total Recall, Starship Troopers, stuff like that. But we see that Gordy, Gordy's brother's death weighs pretty heavily on him. And we find out second thoughts about what it is that they're there to do. And he's really having a lot of thoughts about his relationship with his father and the fact that he thinks his father hates him.
Why did he have to die, Chris? Why did Denny have to die? Why? I don't know. It should have been me. Don't say that. It should have been me. Don't say that, man. I'm no good. My dad said it. I'm no good. He doesn't know you. He hates me. He doesn't hate you. He hates me. No, he just doesn't know you.
Chris tries to, console him as best as he can. And, tries to tell him that his father doesn't hate him. His father just doesn't know him. But this is all kind of interrupted because the gang shows up and they find the boys and they find the body and they decide like, you guys got to get out of here. We're gonna report the body. This is our find. Ace threatens to kill Chris, and we think maybe he's going to. He makes a move towards Chris with a switchblade, and you hear a gunshot, and it cuts to Gordy, who's got Chris's gun, and he has this standoff with Ace.
Come on, LaChance, give me the gun. You must have at least some of your brother's good sense.
Suck my fat one, you cheap dime store hood.
What are you gonna do, shoot us all?
No, Ace. Just you.
And so, Ace makes the usual threats. This isn't the end of this. We're going to find you guys. We'll finish this later kind of stuff. But him and the guys leave. And then Gordy tells the others that they're not going to report it. And, Teddy's a little curious. I mean, they're all a little upset, but Teddy's a little upset about it. He's like, we were here, like, we were going to be famous. And Gordy is feeling like they shouldn't be looking for this kid's death to be the thing that they build fame on.
But we came all this way. We were supposed to be heroes.
Not this way, Teddy. Chris, give me a hand.
Ray Brower's body was found, but neither our gang nor their gang got the credit. In the end, we decided that an anonymous phone call was the best thing.
And so we find out that they wind up making an anonymous phone call and reporting the body. They make their way back into Castle Rock. Vern goes home, Teddy goes home, and we're left with Chris and Gordy. And Chris is just kind of looking around like I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of my life.
I'm never going to get out of this town, am I, Gordy? You can do anything you want, man. Yeah. Sure.
And maybe, it would have been better off for him because we find out that the whole thing that kind of triggered this memory, this flashback for Gordy, for adult Gordy, is that Chris had gotten killed. He had tried to break up a fight and wound up getting stabbed.
Chris did get out. He enrolled in the college courses with me, and although it was hard, he gutted it out like he always did. He went on to college and eventually became a lawyer. Last week, he entered a fast food restaurant. Just ahead of him, 2 men got into an argument. One of them pulled a knife. Chris, who had always made the best piece, tried to break it up. He was stabbed in the throat. He died almost instantly.
And we see that he is writing a story about Chris, and he ends it. You don't hear him, you just say it. You see it on his computer screen as he's typing. It says, although I hadn't seen him in more than 10 years, I know I'll miss him forever. I never had friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? And so that is the end of Stand By Me, as the song starts to play over him looking out the window and seeing kids playing in the yard. So this film had some distribution problems. As I said earlier, Embassy had gotten sold to Columbia. Columbia was trying to sell off the distribution rights and went to a bunch of different studios, and nobody was really particularly interested in it, so Columbia wound up distributing the film themselves. It had a limited release on August 8th, 1986, made $242,000. It then wound up going wide in 745 theaters on August 22nd, grossed $3.8 million, and it was the number 2 film that week. On an $8 million budget, it wound up making about $52 million, so it was actually really popular, and it did really, really well for itself. It's got an 88 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 75 on Metacritic. Those seem kind of harsh, actually. I think it's a better film than that. It's got an A on CineScore. Roger Ebert, 4 stars, my guy. 4 stars. He wrote, the most important thing in the movie is the way the boys talk to one another. They don't talk like movie kids. They talk like the kids I used to know. A mixture of bravado, ignorance, and intense loyalty. And I think that's what really makes this movie a standout, and what makes this movie so great is that these kids really feel real. They don't feel scripted. They feel like 4 kids just hanging out. The movie was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. It earned 2 Golden Globe nominations for Best Motion Picture, Drama, and Best Director for Rob Reiner. And it has been preserved in the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. This is a movie that, if I'm going to sum it up, it's kind of like, it reminds us that there is a special kind of magic in that window of time in between childhood and when adulthood takes over. It's about death, but it somehow makes you feel glad to be alive. This movie, I first saw this movie when I was in college. Watching it, now with kids, grandkids, having lived life, it hits definitely very differently, but it still brings me back to that time. And I kind of worry kids today would not really have this kind of experience. I mean, can you imagine, 11, 12-year-old boys today disappearing for 2 days and, there not being a nationwide manhunt for them? I mean, it just wouldn't happen. But this was the kind of freedom that kids had back in the day. And I'm not advocating, I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it was a different time. And it was a time that I remember. I mean, I remember, summer days in the 1970s, you'd leave the house in the morning and you wouldn't be home until it was dark out. And your parents had no idea where you were for 10, 12 hours. But, those days are long gone. So that's Stand By Me. Thank you for listening. As always, we really appreciate it. Be sure to check out some of the other stuff on our channel. We've got Justin and I doing a Night of the Seven Kingdoms recap. We've got Randall and I obviously doing the main show. We've got some video projects going on. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, whichever platform you're on right now. And we will catch you next time.